Right, here we go. All right. Reed Timmer, 2,000 point score with Drake basketball. Reed, you hit 2,000 points right on the number. How did you know that you were that close to 2,000? Like, how long did you know that like 2,000's right within reach? I might hit it, I might not. Like, was it a goal for you during your playing days?
I knew my senior year that if I was on track to break the record by Josh Young. And when I did that, it was against Bradley kind of late in the conference season. And that was a big win for us. And it was a big deal. Like they gave me the game ball and like announced that the record was broken. But in terms of like reaching 2,000 points, it wasn't really in my head until like our last game where it was like, okay, I'm this far away from it. Then it was kind of in my head. But other than that, like for the whole season, it wasn't too much of a concentration point, just concentrated on winning at that point.
I don't know if I believe that. I mean, every guy is always running the numbers in their head. I mean, Albert Pujols, the only reason why he was sticking it out as long as he did is because he knew 700 home runs. Like everybody knows the numbers. You're telling me you had no idea, like, hey, I got to average 19.2 points a game for 30 games to hit this record. None of that was in your head that season.
That season was special for us. I think just for a winning sake, because that our core group, we had been together for 4 years, some guys 3 years, and we hadn't been too successful, our first 3 years being through 3 coaches and the coaching transition. And then that senior year, we finally had strung together a really strong team. We were battling for first place in the Valley with that Loyola team that went to the Final Four. So that was kind of what we were really focused on. I mean, I just wanted to win. Once all the record breakings like came with that, it was, I understood that was going to happen kind of just naturally, but I wasn't going into every single game like, okay, I need to get 18 here. I need to get 20 here. I knew it would come as if I just concentrated on, what we needed to do game in and game out. And it just falls into place.
Did that run that Loyola made that year, did that surprise you guys, or did you know that team had it in them?
They were definitely, we knew that they were going to be really good. Did I think that they were going to go all the way to the Final Four? No, I don't think anybody did. They were just a really solid team. They weren't intimidating on paper. They didn't really have any big scorers or big, NBA type guys, but they played really well as a team together. They had guys that were a senior led group. I had a few transfers in there, and then, few bounces here and there, win against Tennessee and Miami. And then they just kept going along. So it was definitely cool for the Valley to see. Just unfortunate for us that, we had to put together a team that we thought was going to do some damage in the Valley tournament and against the rest of the team or teams in the Valley. And that just happened. So
how much Sister Jean talk is there in the Drake locker room? Like she became like a bigger story than the actual Loyola team. When you guys are playing Loyola, does Sister Jean get mentioned just offhand in the locker room?
A lot of guys in the locker room were talking about how sick of her we were, just like hearing her, all of the stuff on social media with her, and then she's sitting there at some of the games. We tried to use that as a chip on her shoulder to try and motivate us, but it's kind of hard when it's Sister Jean to kind of like go at her in a sense. But it was just kind of an offshoot, I guess.
So you mentioned it, your first 3 years, I think you guys won a total of 23 games. And then your last year, you have a really good turnaround year, 17-17. Niko Medved came in as the head coach that season. What was it about Niko that got the tide to turn at Drake?
I think there's a lot of things that he did differently, but the things that stood out, I think my teammates that season would agree. He was able to adjust really well in terms of like X's and O's and what we had as a team. He didn't come in and force like a certain system on us. He kind of understood what he wanted to do and what he had as talent around his team and kind of tailored what we were doing to that. I think he was very easy to build trust with him. The guys on the team really believed in him and his vision, and it was easy to buy into what he was saying. Not a lot of coaches are like that. They'll come in and think that everything goes what they want to say, and it doesn't matter what the players are thinking. And then, I just think he understood how our team operated and what we wanted to get out of that last season. And he wasn't concentrating on, transitioning this to be his program and like the longevity of it. He was bought in from the start to get the most out of that season from the guys, because we had a lot of upperclassmen and seniors. So I think we really appreciated him for doing that. And it was unfortunate for Drake that he ended up moving on, but for us, we kind of felt like we helped him get a promotion, and that was kind of satisfying too. So
Yeah, was it tough as an upperclassman, your final year, new guy coming in, to buying into yet again another system when you just have one more year left and it's like, hey man, I'm trying to hit 2,000 points here?
yeah, I would lie. I would be lying if I said I wasn't a little bit nervous in terms of when you get a new coach coming in, you don't really know what he is about and what he wants to do. We had heard good things in the interview process, and every meeting that we had with him in preseason, once he got on campus, was really good. But I think for me and a lot of the upperclassmen, it was just trusting him in the process, but also trusting our core group of guys, because we had known each other for so long. How easy it would have been for all of us to transfer. I mean, we hadn't been successful and we had been there for 3 years, and there's another new coach coming. I mean, we all could have just left. And the way college basketball is now, that's probably the case in over half of the teams in NCAA Division I. So it's like we decided to stay. We kind of had a little meeting and a understanding between all of us that we're going to stay. We're going to find a way to make it work, and we're going to not leave this place without having a positive experience for one last season.
You know, that's a good point. If that would have happened 5 years later, all of you guys probably would have transferred. I mean, you probably would have transferred to, you know, a major college program, and because everybody's taking those, you know, 1-year guys now.
Absolutely.
But Drake would have been in a much different spot today if your class didn't stick around, because Niko got it going, and that leads into Darian DeVries, and that program's in the best spot today as it's been in, you know, decades. So I really didn't think about that until now of, yeah, you guys could have left. How often do you guys talk about that now? Just like, man, if it was a different era, NIL era, we could have jumped to, you know, a North Carolina, an Oklahoma, or whoever it might have been.
Absolutely. I mean, the landscape back then was a little bit different, where, you know, if you did transfer, you did still have to sit out. There was no NIL money, nothing like that. So it's still, I personally stayed, and I think a lot of the guys would agree, I stayed because of the relationships I had with my teammates as well as the school. I knew that that was the right fit for me academic wise, and I was big on academics. Not a lot of guys it's not important to a lot of people, but our team, there was a lot of guys that did care about that in terms of off the court stuff. But yeah, I mean, we talk about all the time. We're still really close. I'm still really close with a lot of the guys in my class and our senior class. So it's just kind of a lifelong friendship thing that we decided to buy into instead of take the selfish way out. I like to, if you think about it that way, it's more of a selfish way out. I'm going to do what's best for me. And I don't blame guys for doing it nowadays, because it just makes sense for them. And if they are just trying to get out of the college experience, get the most money, or if they're just trying to make it to the pros, maybe that's the route you do take. But we were a little bit different, and we wanted a positive experience to take lifelong friends with, be set up for life after basketball. And I think all those factors played into what ended up happening.
You're doing some analyst work for Drake nowadays. You and Michael Admire calling games together. What's the most challenging part of, you know, not being on the floor, sitting behind a microphone and calling a game?
It came kind of naturally for me. I enjoy going on the road a lot with the team, and enjoy being up front and watching games. The difficult part for me is I just want to be out there playing again. You know, it makes me miss the game a lot more, especially when I go with them on the road and you see the process of, you know, traveling with the team, having a roommate on the road, and team meals, and all the stuff that is behind the scenes that you really miss being an athlete. Obviously the games are a big part of that, but it's just kind of that camaraderie that you miss in a locker room that I gotta get to be a part of just through, you know, being an analyst for the team, and interviewing some of the guys and talking to them, being close with them. But just the most difficult part is still just missing the game and wanting to jump back out there.
Is there anything that you see now that, you know, you're, let's see, 5-6 years out of college now, you're still around the Drake program, and so these guys are or not that much farther than you, but there's a lot of life experience that you cram into the 5-6 years right after you leave college, right? And so now you
Mhm.
look back on these 18, 19, 20-year-old kids. Is there anything that you see that's like, man, it's so silly that we used to complain about this thing or this piece, or if I would have known what I know now back then, I would have done this differently. And you see those kids maybe making the same mistake that you did, or having the same type of attitude about a certain situation that you did, that you're like, I get it now that I'm 28, 29 years old.
The biggest thing for me is watching the Drake team. I mean, they've struggled with injuries these last under Coach DeVries' tenure. They've always had some kind of, big injuries happen at unfortunate times, which has affected their postseason play. And some of them are freak accidents. I understand that, but the thing that I learned the most is how to take care of your body for longevity purposes within the scope of basketball. I mean, I used to walk out to practice fresh off of class, sitting for 2 hours, walk right out there and jump into a full speed drill without doing any kind of preparation work, stretching or anything like that. Yeah, you walk through some of the strength coaches warm ups that takes 2 minutes, but I mean, really in terms of nutrition and stretching and all the things you need to do to keep your body healthy and to be able to play long term. I wish I would have known that when I was younger. And then I also try to instill that knowledge on the guys that are playing now, because if a lot of them do have aspirations to play after college. And it was a rude awakening for me once my body got older into the professional ranks, is like how much is involved with taking care of your body. And you do have more time when you're professional because that is your job. And these guys are sometimes in class or have other things they have to do. But that's kind of my big thing. It's just taking care of your body and embracing what it takes to be ready every single day for practice.
Who's the best player in Drake basketball history?
Oh, there's so many. I mean, you look at Adam Emenecker, what he did for the team. Josh Young, obviously, I'm still close with. Tucker now has to be up there with some of the best ever. And obviously, it's tough to compare eras. I mean, there's a lot of guys that were on the Final Four team that were obviously really, really good. Did I have a chance to see them? No, but their names are hanging in the rafters for a reason. So there's a lot of really, really good players in Drake history. I mean, it's tough to say the best one, and it's such a tight knit family too. Everyone, I feel like, knows everybody and is supportive of the program always moving forward. So it's always fun to be a part of that group.
So after Drake, you go on and you play over in Spain, you play overseas. What do we not know about playing overseas? Like, what do you wish that basketball fans here in America would know about, hey, the European game, it's this, and this that you guys would just never understand?
I think now people are starting to wake up a little bit more to it with how many European guys are in the NBA now and how well they're doing with Jokic, Giannis. I mean, the list goes, Luka, all the list goes on and on. But the level of play in Europe is so, I mean, it is so high of a level that it's very hard to explain. But the way the game is over there, there's a certain specific rule changes that make it a little bit different than the NBA, which causes the game to look a little bit different. The court's smaller. There's not as much one-on-one because there's no defensive 3 seconds in the lane. So you can kind of have your big guy stay in the lane for as long as you want, cause a lot more help. And you have to play more as a team, more continuous. The guys are they're ridiculously smart players over there. Their IQ is through the roof. They share the ball. I think it's a more beautiful game over there because the ball really never touches the floor. You see a guy, I mean, we used to get yelled at if we took more than 3 dribbles, maybe sometimes 2, because you don't really need that many dribbles with how skilled those guys are over there. So with the NBA's game, it's a lot of isolation, one-on-one, for good reason, because they are the best in the world. But because of how the rules are in the NBA, if you take some of those rules out, it's the NBA in Europe. I mean, it is unbelievably high level basketball over there.
So with a lot of the changes they've made to the G League, they've made the G League more enticing for a lot of guys instead of taking the money in Europe, which has kind of been the thing, for a long time. It's like, if you're not making the NBA, you'd rather be, instead of playing in the CBA or even the G League, the D League for a while, you'd rather go to Europe, right? We've seen a lot of guys from Iowa State, Drake do that through the years. With the changes that the G League has made, if you were coming out now, would you still choose to go over to Europe, or would you try to stay in America and play in the G League?
I think that has a lot to do with your personality and what you want to get out of basketball, because there's a lot of guys that are in the G League that are there because they're missing like one or two pieces, that they're right on the cusp of the NBA with some of these guys with two-way contracts, and they've gotten chances to be in the NBA. If that's your case and that's your opportunity and you're still young and there's still an opportunity for you to be up and down with the NBA, then I would say stay in the G League. But if you are on a standard G League contract and they did bump up the salary, I think it's closer to above 40,000 for a standard contract now. I would say if you have the personality trait of being independent and really, really loving the game of basketball, I would say go to Europe and get paid, because your body's only young once and there's a window of opportunity to go get paid, especially now with how much the game has grown over in Europe and how much money there is to be made over there. I would say if that is the case, go explore opportunities in Europe and try to have as good of a experience over there as possible and build a career over there. And then that's not to say is if you go over to Europe and you can't make it back to the NBA. I mean, look at Matt Thomas, played in Spain as well. And I mean, he had an effective field goal percentage over there, like 97%, and then boom, he gets signed in the NBA. So it's still possible to have the route of going to Europe, then back to the NBA. So that would probably be my answer, is try to go over there and get paid.
When do you know, like, I believe you're retired right now. You just kind of wrapped up your pro career. You're back. You're in the pharmacy program back at Drake. When do you know is the right time to retire? Because obviously you're not one of these guys, or at least from what I understand, that's wants to hang around too long because you got other aspirations for your career and for your life other than just basketball. How do you know when the right time to make that call is?
I definitely still think I could have still kept going and playing. I was only 26 when I retired, call it quits. But I talked to a lot of the vets on some of my teams over there and asked them the same question. Like, when did you feel is your prime? And then when do you think it was time, like in terms of how your body feels, to cut it off? And a lot of the common answers I kind of thought I got back were 27 is about when they felt is their best body, how their body felt, and with their knowledge of the game for how long they've been playing it. And then once you hit like 33 to 36 range is when your body just starts not giving back to you what you put in it, and it's time. And players know too, like they know what they expect from themselves in a game, and if their body's not allowing them to do that and to play at a level that they are wanting to, then it's time to call it quits, or you can go play for fun in some of the smaller leagues over there, or come back for a smaller role in the G League or something. But I would say your body will tell you, and a lot of different guys' bodies are different. You know, LeBron James has a different body than me. So he's still playing at a really high level and he's that old, but you know, that's kind of the usual answer is what I got from my teammates.
How tough is it on your ego now when you're kind of at the prime of your career, really, from a physical standpoint? You get to your late 20s and early 30s. That's when guys are really at their peak. Athleticism meets knowledge of the game, meets craft and everything else. And you're playing in a pickup game with like guys that I work with. Like, is that tough on your ego, being like, God, I used to be cooking guys like 100 times better than you, and now I'm playing against insurance salesmen?
Yeah, no, it was definitely probably the first 3 to 5 months after I retired. It was mentally, it was tough on me. Just not so much playing in these pickup games, but it was like, who am I now? Basketball has been such a big part of my identity my whole life. And to now have that taken away, it's how do I transition as a person? How do I transition into a new life without this thing that has been such a mainstay in my life for as long as I can remember? So when I play in these pickup games with all of our friends, it's like, now it's out of enjoyment and it's out of missing the game. It's not as much, oh, I wish I was playing out there again. I wish I was cooking guys back, whatever league it is. It's just making relationships and making new friends and making a commitment to the people around me to just stay connected with basketball, not necessarily in the player aspect, but more as an old guy now, just making friends, going to play pickup on Tuesdays and Fridays, and just enjoying the workout aspect of it instead of the game.
How often do you turn it on all the way? Like, it's like, this is me playing to the max instead of like trying to play into the flow of the game that you get in a standard pickup game.
I would say some of the younger Drake guys who are still playing overseas come back and have trained in the summers, and a few of them are back in this window now trying to get signed again, and they're sometimes back in the gym. I'd say when they come back and want me to participate and help them, that's when I would say I would turn it on the most, because they have the most to gain out of it. I have nothing to gain from it, but if I can help them be prepared for what is next for them, their next team and their next role, if I can just manage for 1 or 2 days to turn it all the way up just to give them a good look, it motivates me to do that. But in terms of like just my normal pickup games twice a week, very rarely will it go all the way up to 100%. I'm just trying to get a good sweat in and some cardio.
How much of your success do you think is due to you being left-handed?
It's definitely different. It's a different look. It's just different habits. A lot of guys, I mean, I took advantage of it, especially growing up in the younger ranks, just because not a lot of experienced defenders out there are used to, you're used to closing out with a hand with your left hand up because the guy's a righty. But if I come and shoot with my left hand, it's a little bit more of an open look. But it's been something obviously that has contributed to my success. Do I think that's the only reason? No, but it's definitely something that has helped, because it throws teams off, it throws habits off, and it throws guys off their usual rhythm defending.
So who's the best guy you ever guarded?
No, that's a tough one. In college, the best player I probably had to guard and we played probably was Fred VanVleet, I think, just because of how good those Wichita teams were and how good he was individually. I mean, just never made a mistake, made the right decision all of the time, and how tough of an environment those old Wichita teams were, and those 10,000 fans. You couldn't hear our coach in the huddle. You couldn't hear your teammates calling out plays. It was ridiculous. So I would say him.
Who's the guy that you played against that you can't believe never cracked the NBA?
Ooh, that's a good question. He did end up playing a little bit in the NBA, but his name is Joel Blumboy out of Weber State. My sophomore year, we played him in a Thanksgiving tournament. He had one of the nastiest dunks I've ever witnessed in my life. It was like a rebound putback, almost like a 360 on top of one of our four men. And I said, that guy is one of the most athletic guys I've ever seen in my life. And he ended up sticking with a few teams for maybe their 15th, 16th roster spot and playing over in Europe. But that guy was the most athletic guy we've ever played against. So I was always just assuming he would find a role, but I guess his game didn't translate the best to the NBA.
Final question here, Reed. So with all of this changeover happening with NIL and transfer portals, it feels like a really unsteady landscape right now across college basketball. Is this good or bad for Drake?
I think it depends on the program and how Coach DeVries handles it. I think he's doing a really good job initially. There's a lot of stuff up in the air right now in terms of regulations and how the community is investing in players specifically. But if it's utilized the right way and guys are treated right, but they also know what their expectations are, I think it can be really helpful for Drake because of the community we're in Des Moines, hometown team. There's a lot of supporters that want to see the team do well and are willing to help the guys out when needed. But it's very interesting to see how this will play out in the next 2 to 3 years, because right now it's kind of like a free-for-all. These guys are going asking for ridiculous amounts of money. And I've seen, not at Drake, but I've seen guys go other schools, and it's like, you're a professional. It's like, okay, this school's giving me this. Go to talk on the phone, getting recruited. It's like, okay, X school's giving me this much money. What are you going to give me? Because if you're not going to match or over it, I'm going over there. It's plain and simple. So, and then the other side to that is, you offer that much money to these kids that are 18 to 20 years old. What happens if they get injured? What happens if they don't perform? What happens if they get benched? All these things is the contract that they've signed for this NIL. Are there stipulations, or is it just up to the booster or whoever has the money? Is it up to their discretion? Do they withhold the money? Do they say, well, I'm only going to pay you if you win X amount of games? So there's just so much involved, and there's so much free for all going on right now. That's tough to say how it'll affect Drake. But I think as long as everyone is transparent and everyone understands expectations, I think it can really boost Drake's ability to get recruits, boost Drake's ability to keep guys from transferring, and try to build a program around a strong community.
Would you ever give money to the NIL? Like, say Drake had its own collective, like, is Reed Timmer gonna give money to it?
I mean, I have to graduate and finish all my grad school stuff, but you never know. I mean, if it makes sense to whatever I get out of it and the player gets out of it, I think it's a very good investment for some of these business owners, especially around Des Moines, because it makes sense. It gets your name out, and if they can find a way to almost market their, whatever they're giving, it's a two-way street and both parties win.
Awesome. Well, Reed Timmer, thanks for joining the podcast, man. It was fun. I always liked watching you because I love the lefty. I love the lefty guards, like, Damon Stoudemire and Kenny Anderson, and just the lefty guards through the years. I've always just been a big fan of. And you were that guy for Drake for 4 years. Always win it. Like, you had a good run against Iowa. You were put into Iowa one year. I think you guys ended up losing that game, but you had a great game, and it was just, you always were that guy that, like, could get hot and take over a game, and I loved watching it. So pleasure to get you on the pod.
Awesome, man. Thanks for having me. It was awesome.
You bet.